You are now live.
Thank you. At 5:05 p.m. on, what is today? Monday, May 2nd, I'm calling to order the Finance Committee. If we could get a roll call, please.
Yes, Counselor Villarreal,
Present.
Counselor Rivera,
Here.
Counselor Cassett,
Here.
Counselor Lindell,
Here.
Counselor Romero Worth.
I am here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. Do we have changes to the agenda?
No changes at this time, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Do we have a motion?
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion and a second to approve the agenda. Can we get a roll call, please?
Counselor Cassett,
Yes.
Counselor Rivera,
Yes.
Counselor Villarreal,
Yes.
Counselor Lindell,
Yes.
and Counselor Romero Worth.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. We move on to the consent agenda. Are there items the committee is interested in hearing tonight?
Madam Chair,
Yes, Councilor Rivera.
I wanted a little bit more explanation on item H as well as item J.
H and J. Other items from the committee? Is there a motion?
Move to approve as amended.
Okay, that was a chorus. Let's do that one more time.
Move to approve as amended.
All right. So the chair is going to call the motion by Councilor Cassett and the second by Councilwoman Villarreal. Can we get a roll call on approval of the consent agenda as amended?
Yes, Counselor Villarreal,
Yes.
Counselor Rivera,
Yes.
Counselor Cassett,
Yes.
Counselor Lindell,
Yes.
and Counselor Romero Worth.
Thank you. Yes. Oh, sorry. Yes, and thank you. All right. We move on to the minutes. Bear with us, everybody. We've got a pile of them. We're going to start with the budget hearing minutes from April 13th. Are there changes from staff or the committee? And if not, is there a motion?
No
No
changes from
changes,
staff.
Madam.
Move for approval.
Second.
We have a motion, and a second to approve the budget hearing minutes from April 13th. Can we get a roll call, please?
Counselor Villarreal,
Yes.
Counselor Rivera,
Yes.
Counselor Cassett,
I'll abstain as I was not at the entire meeting.
Counselor Lindell,
Yes.
and Counselor Romero Worth.
Yes. All right, on to the budget hearing minutes for April 14th. Are there changes to those minutes from staff?
No changes, Madam
Are there
Chair.
changes to those minutes from the committee? Is there a motion?
Move for approval.
Second.
We have a motion, a second to approve the minutes from April 14th budget hearing. Can we get a roll call?
Counselor Villarreal,
Yes.
Counselor Rivera,
Yes.
Counselor Cassett,
Abstain as I was not present.
Counselor Lindell,
Yes.
Counselor Romero Worth.
Yes. All right, on to the budget hearing minutes for April 19th. Are there changes from staff?
No changes, Madam Chair.
Changes from the committee? Is there a motion?
Move to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the budget hearing minutes from April 19th. Can we get the roll call, please?
Counselor Villarreal,
Yes.
Counselor Rivera,
Yes.
Counselor Cassett,
Yes.
Counselor Lindell,
Yes.
Counselor Romero Worth.
Yes. On to the budget hearing minutes from April 20th. Are there changes from staff?
No changes, Madam Chair.
Changes from the committee? Is there a motion?
Move to approve.
second,
Motion and a second to approve the budget hearing minutes from April 20th. Can we get a roll call, please?
Counselor Villarreal,
Yes.
Counselor Rivera,
Yes.
Counselor Cassett,
Yes.
Counselor Lindell,
yes,
and Counselor O'Meara Worth.
Yes. On the very last budget hearing meetings, April 26th, are there changes from staff?
No changes, Madam Chair.
Changes from the committee?
Move for approval.
second,
We have a motion and a second to approve the budget hearing minutes from April 26th. Can we get one more roll call, please?
Counselor Villarreal,
Yes.
Counselor Rivera,
Yes.
Counselor Cassett,
Yes.
Counselor Lindell,
yes,
and Counselor O'Meara Worth.
Yes.
Madam
right.
Chair,
Yes.
Madam Chair, this is
Yeah.
Carolyn. Did we do the April 21st?
I think we
I thought
missed those.
Did we? All right, we'll do them again just in case, and that way we'll be covered.
Yes, thank you.
We're approving the budget hearing minutes from April 21st. Are there changes from staff?
No changes, Madam Chair.
All right, changes from the committee.
Move for approval.
Second.
Motion and a second to approve the budget hearing minutes from April 21st. Can we get a roll call?
Yes. Counselor Villarreal,
Yes.
Counselor Rivera,
Yes.
Counselor Cassett,
Yes.
Counselor Lindell,
yes,
Counselor O'Meara Worth.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, we do not have an executive session tonight. We are on to the consent items that were pulled. The first one is item A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H. Request approval of partial release of mortgage between the City of Santa Fe and Tierra Contenta Corporation, mortgage to facilitate the sale of Tract 53A to the Housing Trust. We have Alexandra Ladd here, Director of the Office of Affordable Housing, and Councilor Rivera, you pulled this item.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Alexandra, or Director Ladd. Can you just explain what this means for Tierra Contenta and moving forward?
Yes, I can, Madam Chair, Councilor Rivera. Tract 53A is one of the last tracks from Phase 2. So it's been platted and sitting there for quite some time without any development. There was, I believe, an infrastructure challenge. I'm trying to remember. I think there was a drainage issue or a... Anyway, the Housing Trust is ready to purchase the tract and start development. And so Tierra Contenta Corporation has to transfer the title. But because we have the city holds a mortgage for the entire community, the entire master plan community, the mortgage has to be released for that tract so that the title can transfer.
And what's the potential for the number of homes that we might have in that tract?
Councilor Rivera, it will be 40% affordable. It's pretty small. The number I'm remembering, and I can send you the exact number if you like, but I'm remembering that it's 20 lots that they've been able to plat it for.
Okay, great. Yeah, if you can send me that, that would be great. So that's all I have, Madam Chair. If there's no other questions, I'll move for approval.
second,
All right, we have a motion and a second. Is there further discussion on this item? Seeing none, can we get a roll call, please?
Yes. Counselor Villarreal,
Yes.
Counselor Rivera,
Yes.
Counselor Cassett,
Yes.
Counselor Lindell,
yes,
and Counselor O'Meara Worth.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, from here, we are on to item J, request for approval of source well contract number 022818-EOI, emergency vehicles, fire trucks, and equipment, sub number 113021-RVG-1 in the amount of $1,194,852 for the purchase of an aircraft rescue and firefighting vehicle apparatus truck from E1 Inc. And we have Chief Moya here to answer questions, and Councilor Rivera, you pulled this item.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First, Chief Moya, thank you for all the work that you and your staff are doing up in Las Vegas. I saw some of the crews last night at Walmart getting ready to leave for Las Vegas, and had a little bit of a conversation with them. So reminded me of a lot of the planning and efforts that were done when the Cerro Grande fire was happening when I was still there. So appreciate all the work you and your crews are doing there. A lot of it is volunteering for service up there. So I know those guys are really working hard and doing what they can to help out throughout the state. So I appreciate that. With regards to this vehicle, so there was some discussion in the budget about wanting to approve it for next year's budget, but it was deemed important enough to move forward right away. So can you talk about the importance of this vehicle, why it's so expensive, and what it means to the airport? And I know Mr. Baca is here as well. So.
Yeah, Madam Chair, Councilor Rivera, I'll start and then I'll let Mr. Baca finish. A big part for me is this truck that we currently have is 16 years old. And at any point, if it gives out, we have 48 hours to let the FAA know, and then we would have to shut the airport down for commercial flights if they do not want to come in. So it is a big deal. The main reason why we're pushing it so hard right now is it is 480 days from the time we receive the PO till it gets into Santa Fe. So a lot of what we're trying to do now is just get ahead of the game, and every week we postpone, the price goes up. So they promised me a 4-week quote. After the 4 weeks, it goes up $10,000. So we're just trying to get ahead of the curveball, ahead of how we can accomplish this, and try to get this truck tied down as fast as possible so we can get it ordered and get it here to help us keep this airport running without any issues with our current truck. Mr. Baca, you want to have anything to add to me for that one?
No, you said it perfectly. It is a very important vehicle that if we do not get it now, we're looking at shutting down. So it's really important to get it done now.
Mr. Baca, what do you mean by shutting down? What does that mean for the commercial flights that come in and out every day?
Without fire response on the field, we would have to suspend our Part 139 commercial service certificate. So in other words, all of our commercial flights from Dallas, Phoenix, and from Denver would cease until we get a fire apparatus out here that would be able to handle the size of aircraft that we're getting right now, which is the CRJ 900 and 700.
All right. So Chief Moya, that vehicle, I mean, we don't have crashes at the airport every day. So what determines when that vehicle needs to be replaced?
So, Madam Chair, Councilor Rivera, I think the biggest thing that we're go up against is just life of a vehicle. It's just like a vehicle we drive every day. We're always worried about parts breaking. It is 16 years old. I'll attest to the first time I was there. I was one of the first 6 people to work out there. We put a lot of miles on it at the beginning. We were standing by for every flight. So at the beginning of this truck's life, the current truck we have, we were putting a lot more wear and tear on this vehicle than we should have. And it's just maintenance, long-term care. The new truck is double the size of this current truck. So we will be able to handle more capacity. We'll be able to expand. As Mr. Baca mentioned, if we need to increase our flights or bring more flights in, this truck can handle that. And the current truck we have will continue to operate, and that will be the backup truck. So we will be able to handle more capacity. And if one of the trucks breaks or the frontline truck breaks, we won't have to do any suspension or tell the FAA that we can't have flights coming in or give them a 48-hour notice due to the fact that we immediately have a backup truck in the station. So this is going to give us more capacity and more ability to handle more flights coming into the Santa Fe airport.
All right, and I assume the station out at the airport can handle this bigger vehicle?
Madam Chair, Councilor Rivera, yes, we designed it. I currently have a ladder truck sitting in there, but as soon as this new truck comes, we will have a bay for this truck to immediately go into. And then our other ARF truck will stay there. And then we also have a tender. So a tender is a big water tank. It has 1,500 gallons, and that's our backup. So we actually have more water capacity. So if we have a big incident out there at the airport, we have extra water to facilitate putting it out.
All right, thank you. So I asked that question because I know a lot of people don't know this, including many of the counselors, but we did purchase a fire truck one time that did not fit in the station that it was designed to go into. So just want to make sure. So thank you. That's all I have, Madam Chair. If no other questions, I'll move for approval.
second,
We have a motion and a second to approve this item. Are there further questions or discussion? Seeing none, can we get a roll call?
Councilor Villarreal,
Yes.
Councilor Rivera,
Yes.
Councilor Cassett,
Yes.
Councilor Lindell,
yes,
and Councilor Romero Worth.
Yes. That item passes. We are through the consent agenda items. We do not have action items tonight, but we do have a presentation on the FY21 audit status update. We have Alexis Latero here. She's the interim finance director, and Ricky Bejarano, who is our accounting officer. And I believe we were going to start with some thoughts, updates, status information from the two presenters.
Madam Chair, I would like to defer to City Manager Blair. He'd like to make a few opening remarks.
Okay, City Manager Blair. Welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Appreciate it. Good evening, councilors. I first want to start off by saying that we are grateful to Alexis Latero for stepping up to be our acting finance director, and Ricky Bejarano, whose day job is CAO, but who has also agreed to serve as the acting deputy finance director. As I think I mentioned last week in text messages to each of you, we will begin hopefully this week by posting the search for a new full-time finance director. And we'll make sure to share that with all of you, to share with your networks, in hopes that we can quickly find a new full-time permanent finance director. I'm sort of trying to set the stage a little bit for the detail that both Acting Director Latero and Acting Deputy Director Bejarano can fill in with details with specific questions that you all are likely going to have. As you all well know, a week ago, we received a letter from CLA, which was the auditor we had entered into an agreement with to conduct our FY21 audit. The letter was brief, and it indicated to us that they were withdrawing immediately from our contract. And that's what the letter said. I know that you all received the letter from the auditor as well, from CLA. Since that time, it's been a little murky, to be fully candid. We received an email from the state auditor staff on Tuesday night, April 26th, a little after 5, directing then Finance Director Mary McCoy to start the procurement process, submit a new draft contract with a different IPA for fiscal year 21 as soon as possible, as a result of CLA withdrawing from the audit. The finance team moved swiftly. As I mentioned to you during the governing body meeting on Wednesday night, we were ready and had noticed that with the Santa Fe, New Mexican, that they would run the RFP on Saturday, with our intent that we would post it today and begin the search for our new auditor. On Friday night, April 29th, just before 5 o'clock, about 10 till 5, our staff received an email from the State Auditor General Counsel asking us to hold off regarding the RFP, saying that our office will be in contact with our leadership to determine next steps prior to proceeding forward. So that's what we officially know. I'll highlight for you that we're in a place that we're still in the position that we're trying to gather data to find out what's happened, why it's happened, and where we go from here. I want to be just straight up front by saying that it's our mistake that the audit is not in on time. It's our mistake that the audit is that the cash wasn't balanced and the trial balance wasn't reconciled. We take this very seriously, and we are working as swiftly as possible to correct these issues, to get the FY21 audit turned in correctly and on time as soon as possible, and have the FY22 audit turned in on time, and every audit after that turned in on time. What we're trying to navigate in a couple different ways, I believe I mentioned that the mayor and city attorney McSherry and I met with CLA leadership last Wednesday, had a chance to ask some questions, try to understand more about what led them to withdraw. They were very kind to meet with us. They were very forthcoming. I appreciate all that they've said to us, but we still don't quite have a handle on what's caused this, what we need to correct, and where we need to go. To that end, I can tell you that the audit contract that we entered into with CLA provided two scenarios whereby CLA could withdraw. One without cause for withdrawal would have been for them to notify us that they would be withdrawing from the contract in 10 days. We didn't get that. We got an immediate withdrawal. The alternative is that they could have withdrawn with cause after identifying a material breach. 7 days later, we still don't understand what that material breach is. And so what I want to be clear about is that, as I mentioned earlier, we are ready to get to work to fix anything that needs to be fixed regarding our financial processes, our systems, increasing personnel. We're ready to do whatever it takes. Our frustration lies in that the state auditor was very open last week with reporters telling the Santa Fe New Mexican that our house is on fire and how dire the situation was. We recognize the mistakes we've made and the actions that we need to take to correct that. But our frustration is it's now been a week since we were told that our auditor was withdrawing, and we still haven't received official word from the state auditor himself detailing the mistakes, explaining the material breach, explaining when and how we're supposed to come meet with them and DFA and the local government unit. We're anxious to do all these things to fix this. We're just waiting to hear that actually happen. And so what I can tell you tonight, counselors and chairwoman, is that I'm ready. Acting Director Lotero is ready. Acting Deputy Director Bejarano is ready. We are ready to full force sit down with the state auditor, with the local government unit, with DFA, with anyone that has ideas about what we can do in a constructive way to make the finance department work better, to make the city work better, and to make sure our audits are done correctly and are on time. So that's the broad picture of where we are right now. With that, I am happy to turn it over back either to Acting Director Lotero or to you, Chairwoman, if you have questions for me or any of the counselors do, whatever you all deem, we're happy to do.
Thank you, City Manager Blair. I do want to turn this back over. I believe Acting Director Lotero wanted to turn this over. Well, I guess she turned it over to you. It's my understanding that Deputy Finance Director Bejarano is leading the audit now, in charge of our work on that. And I guess I would ask for you to confirm that.
Yes, Madam Chair, that is correct.
Okay. And I do have questions for Deputy Finance Director Bejarano, and but I do want to see if he had anything to add to what City Manager Blair has just stated. And if not, I'm ready to move forward with questions directly.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, I would like to say a few things. I think we need to step back a little bit to kind of advise the council, okay, what it takes to be ready for audit. which is essentially the more general term or the general reason that CLA pulled out. Generally, if things are going as they need to be or should be, the accounting records are up to date month after month. Your months are closed out every month. All bank accounts, we have approximately 18 of them, are closed out every month. We have a lot of zero-based accounts, meaning money flows in and then flows back out into the general fund. Those need to be reconciled as well, even though they're in and out of counts. And then every month, there should be ongoing corrections made to the books and records. The city essentially was behind on that. So in essence, what we're in is a situation where we're catching up the records while we're trying to get them ready for audit as well. So it's a two-pronged approach. One is actually generating the books and records, and the other is preparing them for audit so that we can submit to the auditors whatever they request. In an ideal world, we would have been able to have all our adjustments done by the end of August, or by the beginning of August after the 6/30 fiscal year end 21, and then generated a trial balance out of the Munis system. The reasoning behind when I had offline conversations with the auditors was that our contractors were preparing our trial balance within their Caseware system. Caseware is a program that generates books and records for other entities like ours. That was REDW. The auditors wanted that directly out of Munis, which is our book of record. And so that was already causing some problems in transferring from Caseware to Munis. When we submitted the trial balance on March 31st, cash had not been fully reconciled and we had a problem with revenues. The good side of the problem is that we had more money in the bank than we showed in the books and records. When it's the other way around, it's all but disastrous, or it's actually disastrous. So what this means is that we had revenues in the bank that had not been recorded in the books and records. That is, I can't speak for CLA, for Clifton Larson Allen, but that's, I think, essentially at the crux of the matter. In government, if you can't nail down your cash, because cash flowing in, cash flowing out is what government does generally. Even though we own assets, we provide services, whatnot. On the accounting side, nailing cash down right from the get-go is the most important thing that we need to do. And that's the one thing that we're working on now. I can go into any amount of detail that you'd like for me to go into on what's being done, but we are moving forward. One of the things I'd like to emphasize, if I may, is that this isn't a start over. This is essentially when you're working on your computer, you know something's amiss, so you reboot and you get going again. That doesn't mean you've lost all the work that you've been doing. The work that we've been doing over the last few months, at least since I've been here, is good, solid work. It will contribute to the audit. Cash isn't the only thing that's audited. We have things like fixed assets. We have program transactions that are audited. But if the auditors felt they couldn't nail down cash, then that was most likely the reason for the pullout. The other thing I want to say is that a tremendous amount of work has been done that will be submitted to the new auditors. It may be requested in different formats, in different form, and they may go into more detail because they're newer auditors when the new auditors begin. So it's not a complete start over. We have not wasted the time, effort, and money that we've put forth so far. But we're rebooting to get this train back on the track and get going again. We are, the difference that you read about in the paper, the $4.5 million to $5 million that wasn't accounted for, that's what I'm referring to or alluding to when I talk about there being more money in the bank than is recorded in the books and records. That's been reduced by approximately 1.6 to $2 million with some transactions, some larger transactions that were found that had not been recorded when that money came in. We're going one by one with transactions and comparing them to the bank, or at least our contractors are. And we have approximately 1 quarter left, the months of April, May, and June of 21 to go. And then from there, we need to step back and see where we are at that time. We're confident that we will figure out what money was there that we didn't record in the 21 year, and then move forward from there. And hopefully by that time, we'll have new auditors on board to audit what we've done. With that, I'm happy to stand for questions.
Okay, and I see hands up already. We do have a number of questions. As I have said, this is a very serious situation. And this committee, and in fact, the governing body, has had regular reports on where we are with the audit. I feel now that this committee will be doing more and deeper oversight on this process. We are going to dive into the details of this, and we are going to understand exactly where the problems are, what's being done to fix them, and to make sure that we are developing the processes and the technology to get this done. This is unacceptable. We cannot continue this way. I think we all recognize that. And I think this is, there's just a cloud over this city. And there are lots of good people who are well-intentioned, who are working very hard to get this done. And I want to see the collaboration necessary to get it done. I have some questions, and I'm going to take the prerogative as chair to start this conversation. Mr. Bejarano, you talked about catching up and getting ready for the audit. I want us to have an underlying understanding of exactly what you mean when you say that. So I get the catching up part, I think. The catching up part means that we hadn't done the basic accounting work month to month to be at a place where we could, quote unquote, get ready for the audit. So maybe you could just elaborate a little bit about the catch up, and then elaborate a little bit about what it means to get ready or be ready for an outside group to come in and audit the city's books.
Well, one of the, if I may, Madam Chair, one of the first things that has to be caught up is obviously what I mentioned when I mentioned that our revenues not being posted to the general ledger. Our deposits went to the bank, money got to the bank within 24 hours, but the recording of those funds was either inaccurate or didn't happen at some place in time. The catching up is going back month by month. When you find yourself in this situation, you have no choice but to go back. The beginning of the year was July of 2020, July, August, all the way through June of 2021. And that's just for deposits that didn't, for whatever reason, didn't get recorded into the bank. We've already found a couple of items that totaled to $1.6 million in that exercise. We need to continue that through the April, May, and June months that I alluded to earlier, and then go back to see if we're not completely imbalanced, go back to see why. The other catching up is that bank statements weren't reconciled by bank statement to the books and records on a one-to-one basis, essentially for the entire year. That's on the deposit side. On the revenues, on the disbursement side for cash, one of the things we had to come up with, and we have a brilliant accountant in our staff member, Tommy Chavez, who had to figure out a way to go back to July and clear outstanding checks. And in fact, it went back into the 2020 year. We were showing in the books and records all these outstanding checks that weren't outstanding. They had already cleared the bank. But the process of going in there and clearing those out, as you would if you were doing your own bank statement at home, had not happened. And that's one of the things we worked on. We came up with, or Tommy came up with a systemic way. The only reason I mention her is because she deserves a lot of credit for this. She had to go back 2 years. These were thousands of checks that had been issued, ACHs that had been issued, that had cleared the bank, but it had not been removed as outstanding, which made cash look like it was less than what it actually was. That's on the disbursement side. On the capital asset side, our capital assets are still in the E1 system, which is pre-Munis, and they have not moved in. On the accounts receivable side, the Munis accounts receivable module was never implemented, essentially. It's there, it just has not been implemented. Those are some of the more major examples.
And, okay. All right, let's come back to that in a minute. So our understanding of why CLA pulled out is because the cash wasn't reconciled. And my understanding, what I've been told, is that we submitted a trial balance the end of March. They tested the trial balance. The trial balance failed. One of the reasons it failed is that we had not reconciled the cash. And to your point earlier, the problem is that we have almost $5 million in the bank, more than is reflected on our general ledger. Am I correct in that understanding?
Madam Chair, that is correct. One of the things that I discussed with the managing partner of CLA is the reason for the pullout for cash is that cash in government, cash touches everything. You can't move forward if cash isn't nailed down. So yes, short answer to your question, yes.
Okay. Did they cite other reasons why they could no longer conduct the audit and decided to withdraw?
The offline discussion with cash essentially failing, and because cash touches everything the government does, they couldn't rely on the trial balance at all. So essentially, they didn't want to expend the effort, time, and money. Time is money to chase after other accounts and whatnot. They had started auditing the CFA, but the CFA they considered incomplete because the detail for the COVID relief funds had not been done.
Okay, and so to translate, that means what was it, $17 million?
Madam Chair, yes, that's correct.
In CARES Act money that we pushed out the end of last year was not reflected in the CFA. Can you tell us, just in case we have folks listening that aren't familiar with all these acronyms and accounting terms, what the CFA is?
The CFA is the Statement of Expenditures of Federal Awards. And the COVID relief fund money was reflected. There just wasn't detail tying it back to each program in the manner in which we distributed it. We had one firm that did the other major programs, and that was complete. And then another firm was going to complete the COVID relief funds, but that same firm was working on cash at that time. So everything essentially got behind. We went ahead and submitted the CFA. The auditors actually accepted it initially with the understanding that the detail for the COVID relief funds would come. But then when we submitted the trial balance, because the CFA was submitted March 16th, the trial balance was submitted March 31st, they had no way of verifying the cash to the CFO or to the trial balance at that point, or felt it was too big an obstacle at that point.
Okay, so we have two reasons. Anything else? We've got a CFA that was incomplete, and we have cash reconciliation. Again, $4 to almost $5 million reflected in our, showing up in our bank account, not showing up on our general ledgers. What, is that pretty much the crux of our problems?
Well,
At the high level?
If I may, Madam Chair, you could consider then the trial balance couldn't be relied upon. So it's three reasons at that point.
Okay. All right, so let's zero in on the important, one of the important pieces here, the cash reconciliation, which you've said touches everything, very central to government, very central to getting this done. Can you talk a little bit about city government, how we take in cash, how cash moves through the system, what our issues are with cash?
So yeah, Madam Chair, yes, I can. I'll look at my notes a little bit because it's extensive explanation, but throughout, if we start at source, so let's say at utilities or the public works areas, parking, we have all these different sources of cash or revenue coming in. So it's as basic as when you put your quarter in the parking meter, those quarters come in. They add up to an extensive amount of money. The last deposit that I actually went over with one of our cashiers was an $8,800 deposit, all in quarters. So we have that real basic cash coming in. We also have cash coming in the front counter when people come in and they pay their bill. We have checks coming in. We have credit cards. When I pay my utility bill every month, it goes through Paymentus credit card system. But there are other credit card systems throughout the other various areas. So we have different revenue sources, and it's important to draw this distinction. We have revenue sources. For example, a revenue source might be parking, might be utilities, might be land use. So those are the sources. But then we have within those sources different methods of payment. So parking by itself could be coin, could be credit card, could be checks for people that pay for the entire year, or companies that pay by the month. So right there you have like 4 different sources coming in. When those sources come in, they have to be, first of all, designated to parking, and then taken from the various systems and posted accordingly. At City Hall, receipts at City Hall go first through the E1 system, the old system, because we didn't implement the accounts receivable system. Generally, your transaction flow is you develop an accounts receivable, and then the cash comes in, and you debit cash and credit that receivable. Currently, we're still on E1. It's kind of a holding place for those revenue sources, and that includes City Hall, parking, police. For utilities, they have the UCIS system that they're going off of, and they'll be going on to another system, but currently goes into the UCIS system. Transit is by journal entry. They take money in, and then one journal entry is made so it can be posted to the general ledger. Same thing with the community centers, Salvador Perez, Fort Marcy, Genoveva Chavez, Bicentennial, and then you have the court system. They go through manual import. The reason that's important is from there, it's these items are sitting in these different systems, and then they have to be transferred and translated into the Munis system manually.
So they're transferred from E1 manually to Munis.
Yes, ma'am. And we have all these different systems. The other thing I would add is that we also have all these point of sale systems. I'm not familiar with all of them, but you have the majority of them are active cash register cashiering system, but there are also different systems throughout the city. So you have different points of sale systems, you have different methods of payment, and they're all coming in for different revenue sources. And it's just a matter of these things just got behind. At one point in time throughout the 21 year, could be for a number of reasons, but we had one person handling all of this at City Hall. All of these transfers coming in, all of these postings that had to be done. We had one person, one cashiering supervisor who was acting as the only cashier and also getting things into the system. Not an excuse, but it's to demonstrate at what point they were, Madam Chair.
Yeah, and you bring up a good point there. I'm not looking for excuses, and what I'm looking for is what's the problem? What are we going to do about it? What's the plan for moving forward? And so while, you know, the state figures out what it's doing or not doing, there's plenty of work for us to be doing, to be getting things in order, to be prepared for when we know what's happening, whether we are getting another auditor or we're whatever's happened. We're getting another auditor one way or another, but who's providing that, whether we're going out to RFP or not. So why, so that you mentioned this AR system technology piece, this accounts receivable build out of Munis, correct? So it's a configuration. Yeah. I'm sorry.
It is a module that already exists within our Munis system. We just did not implement it and go live with it.
Okay, and what is stopping us from going live with the accounts receivable module or configuration?
Madam Chair, what it would require is aligning all our processes, procedures, internal controls to feed into that Munis system, and training throughout the entire city, wherever money comes in, no matter what the point of sale system is, so that it either is uploaded into the Munis system or the transfers occur within those points of sale. If it's at utilities, utilities is in the best position to generate whatever entries need to be generated to feed into that accounts, that external, that for what is for them, an external accounts receivable system, because they're working currently in USIS, the UCIS system. They'll be moving to a different system. That's the world they live in. The reason I use utilities is because it's huge. And then through technology, through system inputs and whatnot, then we've got to figure out how they can easily then transfer that data, those revenue sources, all that coding into Munis as automated as possible, because we all know that the more manual the system is, the more manual the transfers or the adjustments are, then the higher risk there is for error.
Okay, so yeah, and just there's so many little things we can go down. So the biggest departments in city government that handle cash are which ones?
Well, department-wise, it would be utilities and public works.
Okay, and is parking a close third?
Well, it's part of public works, I believe. So.
Oh yeah, that's right. I'm sorry. It's a division. I'm sorry. You're right. Okay, and so back to this. So it sounds, so what you're telling me is, one, we need to activate this piece of technology in our Munis system. But in order to do that, we have to have the procedures that everybody follows about how you take it in, where it gets moved, how it goes like along the assembly line to getting inserted into the computers, into the technology, into the Munis system. Am I understanding that? So there's like two
Madam
things
Chair.
here.
Madam Chair, that is correct, but it beyond getting written procedures and policies and also we will, anytime you make this type of change, you also have to reevaluate the entire internal control structure. And that will be unique to what I'm referring to as point of sale. When I refer to point of sale, it's wherever we take in money, that will have to be evaluated. So at Public Works, it would have to be evaluated within parking and everything else that is part of Public Works. Land use, same thing. It's going to be unique to those points of sale.
And I have to imagine, we knew with the McCard report that we had problems with cash and revenue. It can't be possible that we've done nothing for the last 4 years. What have we done to better this situation?
Madam Chair, I wasn't here at the time of the McCard report, but in reading the report, I am able to go through the recommendations, and I've highlighted, I'm opposite, I think, of what your question is. I've highlighted what has not been done, and there are some very critical things that just weren't done for whatever reason. Part of that is that in this type of process of remediation, of getting the train back on track, it's not your general run-of-the-mill accountant. I think it's important for me to mention, I've been here before. I know how to get to the other side. If you haven't been here before, as I did when I did one of these projects for the first time, you flail for a long time. And frankly, I wasted a lot of time, effort, and money of the entity that I did this for. It takes the experience of having been in this type of situation to be able to come out on the other side. I'm not putting out my resume, but I've been doing this for 44 years now. I've gone from manual systems to IBM systems that were mainframes to personal computers. It is not an easy lift. And I think perhaps the right investments may not have been made. As soon as the McCard report was issued, the McCard report points this out, that we needed to hire expertise to get to these places within their recommendations. And that's just on the cash side. No excuses, I'm not offering excuses, but it's not an easy lift. It's not like reconciling your cash at home for your home account. It's not even like reconciling cash for a middle-sized business. This year alone, we're close to a $400 million enterprise. And there are so many moving parts just with intake of cash alone that a lot of times, I know what I've done in one agency is I stopped the whole cash flow for a month. We didn't bill, we didn't pay for a month so that we could get everything caught up and then see where we're at. Sometimes it takes that type of effort. I'm not saying that we would even contemplate doing that with the city. But again, I can't emphasize enough, it takes having been there and gotten to the other side to do this.
Okay, so we have known for about a week now that we have a cash reconciliation problem. You said we've identified a little bit of money. Walk me through both what is being done to reconcile and where you found that money.
If I may, Madam Chair, the I'll go back to on the disbursement side, that is nailed down. We know what checks we've issued, we know what's cleared the bank, we've cleared that out. Generally, that side, in my experience, is actually the most problematic. It's not our problem. Our problem is identifying revenues that are in the bank that didn't get posted to the general ledger. We identified a couple of, or the contractors identified a couple of items that total up to about 1.6 to $2 million that where money came in from a different type of source. If I remember correctly, I'll identify it exactly for you, but I don't remember now. But there were a couple of postings that just didn't happen. For whatever reason, the wire, ACH, whatever it was, check got to the bank and we got credit for it, but it didn't get posted to the right accounts within Munis.
Okay, and so what are we doing? What have we identified in terms of internal processes or controls that failed? That got the money to the bank, but didn't get put into the ledger?
Madam Chair, that's a discussion that we're having. The point of failure basically is in once the money was deposited, it has to immediately or simultaneously be recorded into Munis. That's where we failed. We got the money to the bank and we may have forgotten. We may have thought that the posting did go in and didn't get approved at a higher level. Every posting takes an approval process. That's part of the internal control system. So if person A posts something and person B reviews it, there might even be a secondary approval there. If any one of those approvals doesn't happen, it doesn't go into the system. It's a fail-safe. Could be any number of reasons. We need to investigate. Once we clear out these excess funds or get them into the system, then we need to do that type of evaluation. But the likelihood is, and it's not even likelihood, the reality is we need a complete review. Take the McCard report, it's still relevant. Review our internal controls over the cash system and how it gets posted into the general ledger and see where the faults are.
And you're working to do that now?
Yes, right now, actually, we're working to identify the cash that we have that didn't get posted. And that process, so that everybody understands, is the arduous process of we went all the way back to July, pulled every deposit. And then we downloaded the information from the bank and it's going item by item. One of the problems we're having is that some stuff, by the time it got to the bank, was posted in batch. So for example, you might have a deposit with a July 5th date along in the total of the deposit a separate deposit that has a July 25th date, and they got lumped together in that batching. Those between our head cashier and our consultants, those had to be disaggregated so that you could see the one-to-one relationship with the bank.
All right, so when you get done going all the way through the year, I think you said you have, what was it, May, June, April, May, June still to go in that?
That's correct, Madam Chair.
One-to-one. You think you're going to find the rest of the money there?
Madam Chair, we believe so. The one thing that we haven't started comparing, because we're comparing one-to-one, so we can demonstrate that to the auditors. But the other piece is then going into the federal wires and downloads of revenues from the federal system. If we're still off $1 million, $2 million, then it's got to be in some of those larger external sources that come in that didn't get recorded. Money got to the bank, but it didn't get journaled.
Okay, and so all of this is going to help inform you as to what kinds of processes we need, where our processes broke down that led to things being put into the bank without being properly recorded.
Madam Chair, that's correct. I also want to mention, because I think I've not emphasized it enough, the internal control process of our policies and procedures for how we handle cash need a complete re-examination. I'm qualified to do that. I've done the certification through AICPA for internal controls. That is probably the most essential thing, because there's always, cash is the riskiest thing, whether it's at the bank, whether it's credit cards, whether it's actual cash. Cash is your most liquid asset and the most likely to be at risk. We need to evaluate those internal controls formally in order to come out on the other side of this and say, we have a system, we have the policies, we have the procedures in place, and we also have the internal control structure overlying the entire system.
Yeah. And let's see, where do I want to go next? So this isn't just a finance department problem. The cash, as you've said, comes in at various departments. Most of it in two very big and important departments. What are you doing and what is being done to collaborate with those departments in this work?
Madam Chair, if I may, I think first and foremost, it's accurate to say this isn't just about finance as a department, but finance bears the brunt of the responsibility. We are responsible for accounting for all the cash. We are responsible for ensuring that the internal control structure is set throughout the city. That is our, for lack of that's our shtick. That's our wheelhouse.
Your wheelhouse.
So we are responsible across the board. I would hesitate to lay any of the responsibility on any other department. We are responsible for ensuring that this happens. What we are doing or have begun to do on the other department side is started, but had to stop because of what's been happening with the audit, meeting with the other departments and understanding their cash flow, how information comes in. We called it the month-end and year-end close process. Currently, we don't officially close out our months and we don't really officially close out our year. We actually go by the seat of our pants. And what I had started doing, I was able to get to public utilities, went through the entire structure, had to hit the pause button when everything started happening with the audit. But that's going to be the beginning, is starting with the month-end close process that we've already talked to this committee about, and the year-end close process, and work our way backwards. That's in accounting, that's a tracing process. With some, because you're going backwards, right back to the source and where the transactions start. For some departments, it may be what we refer to as a vouchering process. We start at the beginning and work our way all the way up to the finance department. What it's going to take that, in addition to that, is consistent, ongoing communication with all the departments, which I need to figure out how to do.
Yeah, and I wasn't trying to suggest there was blame to be had, but just that this is again, I think I said at the beginning, this has got to be a collaborative effort across city government with, figuring out and it's understanding their systems, how they take in money, how they move it along the assembly line towards the bank and the general ledger, and making sure that that is happening in a way that's appropriate. And but it's not, but we can't be in silos, right? This has got to be a group collaborative effort. And I mean, I'm interested, I think, in hearing how that's going to happen, right? How are we going to be working with the departments and making sure that everybody understands what the expectations are, that finance understands what unique problems they have, and that we work together to figure out what the solutions are for this. And so I just want to emphasize that collaborative nature that has got to go on in getting this work done.
If I may, Madam Chair.
Yes.
I think what you're referring to as collaboration is also the finance, accounting, and most especially the accounting side, understanding how these various processes within these various departments work without trying to impose or inflict our will on them. That never works. And I think, again, there's not blame, it's not an excuse, but trying to impose this as we have in the past just doesn't work, because what directors and accountants in those other areas or financial people in those other areas will say is, not going to do it. It's too much, don't have the resources. That collaboration needs to get right down to the nitty-gritty of finance recommending, well, they're going to have this, this, and this for this to work. I don't think we've been there before. As I speak to colleagues in other departments, it's been more of an imposition of finances will, or we won't process your stuff. We can't continue to do that.
Yeah. All right. As I've said at the beginning, this committee is going to be more engaged at deeper levels in what's going on. And I am interested in knowing what the problem is, what the issue is, and how we're going to solve it, and what do you need to get it done. And as I've said before, this can't go on. We have got to get this figured out. And it's very serious. It's very discouraging. It distracts us from the other really good things that are happening across the city. We have got to get our financial house in order. I believe that there are people in city government that are capable of doing this, you being foremost among them. But at every level of this government, there are people working very hard to get this right. And we've got to get this right. This can't go on. We have a number of committee members who have their hands up. We also have counselors who don't sit on this committee who we will go to. I'm going to take the committee members first. Councilor Rivera.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess City Manager Blair, previous audit reports to the Finance Committee and the governing body had all kind of painted this rosy picture that everything was going well, and clearly that wasn't the case. So where was the breakdown?
Pardon me, Madam Chair, Councilor Rivera. The audit report information that you were given is the same audit report information I was given. And so I don't know that I have a good explanation for you beyond that to say there clearly was a breakdown. And we are working to remedy that swiftly. So I'm sorry, sir, I don't have more information to say beyond that.
All right, thank you. So then my question goes to Ms. Lotero or Mr. Bejarano, since they participated in the presentations of the audit reports.
I'm happy to respond to that, Madam Chair, Councilor Rivera. The the push and this hard date setting that occurred March 16th for the CFA, the March 31st for the trial balance. These dates that were set were in and of themselves unrealistic from the very beginning.
Okay, hold on. So why was that not relayed to the committee and to the governing body?
That I couldn't answer, but for myself, I've been here now I believe it's 113 days. When I arrived, the train had already left the station. The dates had already been set. Trying to get my feet wet with 4 contractors. Not as an excuse, but it takes time to figure out what's going on.
Sure. So
And-
Miss Lotero, why, can you answer that question? Why was there a little more of a rosy picture painted for finance and governing body when that wasn't the case?
Madam Chair, Councilor Rivera, I would say a lot of it, we were up until we hired in Mr. Bejarano, we were extremely dependent on the contractors to keep us informed and lead the audit prep work. And I don't believe that it was being done aggressively enough, honestly. And I don't want you to think that it wasn't that we weren't making an effort to try to get this audit done and get these issues resolved. I know we came before you with bars and contracts and everything else to get these external auditors in place. And you can, as far as the intricacies of how they work together, I think Mr. Bejarano has a better answer for you on that. But I would say that it was the dependence on too many external audit firms. And I think that part of what we would like to do going forward is hire appropriate staff and get our, we've also, and I don't want to use this as an excuse. I just think it's an important thing that we've committed to each other to work on, is to hire staff, appropriate staff, trained staff, and have people in-house, so we're not quite as dependent on these external contractors.
Thank you, Miss Lotero. I'm just talking about the basic reports that were given to Finance Committee and governing body.
And Madam Chair, Councilor Rivera, that is the information, as City Manager Blair stated, that was the information I was provided. I will grant you, I wasn't deeply involved in the audit prep and the audit work at that time. I was more focused on other areas. But I think that we were explaining or communicating to you the information we were receiving from the contractors who were charged with prepping us for this audit.
Clearly, CLA had some issues. Were those not communicated until the letter was sent of resignation?
They were engaged. They were, they signed the contract in December. The entrance conference occurred. They started their audit work. I think whereas Mr. Bejarano has stated that where things took a turn was when the trial balance was submitted.
If I may, Madam Chair, Councilor Rivera, CLA essentially was in a wait and see posture for those dates that had been set. They scheduled their work that way. They stated, okay, our real work will begin March 16th when the CFA submitted. We then had the entrance conference, and then they were waiting for the 31st for the trial balance to be submitted.
And why wasn't that communicated to the the people that make the decisions, finance committee and governing body specifically?
I believe it was. The dates were communicated. They just weren't realistic dates. As it
And why,
turns out.
so why wasn't that communicated?
Because it was at that point that we realized when the CFA was submitted, and then subsequently the trial balance was submitted, and they started doing their test work on that. I think Ms. Lutero alluded to the fact that we're relying on the contractors to submit completed work. And it wasn't until it was submitted that we realized that there were gaps within that work. We did know that we had that gap between what was at the bank and the trial balance. We communicated that to CLA. They said, okay, we'll test, we'll do some preliminary testing and let you know if it's acceptable or not. It turns out it was not acceptable at that point.
All right, you mentioned this was just a reset, like turning off your computer and turning it back on, I thought is what you said. So really, we shouldn't be late on our audit and audit findings. Is that correct?
That is, Madam Chair, Councilor Rivera, that is correct.
Okay. I asked at the last meeting about capital assets, and what I was told was that we were up to date. Everything was copacetic on capital assets. And now I heard you say something about the E1 system and those capital assets not being reconciled. Can you address that?
Madam Chair, Councilor Rivera, I did not say they're not reconciled. They are reconciled within the E1 system, but our book of record is Munis. That information has to get to and come out of Munis, or it continues to be a weakness within the audit. So additions, deletions were recorded, but all of that has been continued to be recorded within the E1 system. And the entire list, the asset listing, both of construction in progress, which is one huge area, and then actual fixed assets that are recorded in the record, now need to be transferred accurately to the Munis system. The reason that's a heavy lift is because you have depreciation schedules, you have movement from CIP, from construction in progress, into completed fixed assets that are then recorded in the system. All that is constantly moving. And what we need is essentially a stop to get all that transferred into the Munis system. We have numerous, a plethora of assets that now need to be recorded in Munis. The fixed asset module is there. It's working. We just haven't had the data transferred into the Munis system.
All right. So again, last week when I asked about it, that none of that was communicated. It was all more of basically everything's fine. So I have a little bit of issue with that. I assume the finance department has been aware of cash issues in parking division, and a couple years ago, somebody had been accused of stealing coins from the parking division, and from what it sounds like, that still hasn't been reconciled. Is that correct?
I wouldn't even be able to answer that question. I'm not familiar with the situation.
Ms. Lutero, do you know?
I am not aware of that. That I may not be aware of that because it's a personnel issue. If it was, involving some nefarious activity by an employee, I may not have been privy to that information.
Yeah, maybe a personnel issue, but it was in all the papers, so I think it's pretty widely known. If somebody,
if I could could add one detail that Ms. Verano discussed with me and another party earlier today is one day last week, we took in $8,000 worth of quarters. That's just quarters. And I believe it was in parking. He can correct me if I'm wrong, but that's a complicated accounting for that, counting it, depositing it is a pretty complicated undertaking. And I think it's illustrative of the kind of work that and tracking that they have to do.
So why are we still allowing that?
The collecting of quarters or
Yes.
quarter payments.
Yes.
I think that's a whole separate issue. We might want to address at a later date. I think, most of the world has moved on to credit cards, debit cards, other forms of payment.
Yep.
But it may not be something that we as a city want to go to, being that we have such a diversified population and people who live and visit here.
If there were issues with cash in any way, shape, or form, should we not be requesting a forensic audit? Why or why not?
Madam Chair, Councilor Rivera, we can request forensic. There's no such thing as a forensic audit. There are forensic reviews, forensic accounting. That's a misnomer, but we could bring back everything from a card to, there are a number of firms that do forensic work. But that's all that they will do. They'll look to see if there's money missing. I don't know that we're really there yet. If we do have suspicion of fraud, it's a two-step process. First, is it isolated or is it pervasive? There are a number of things we need to determine before. The cost of continuing forensic audits. I've been at two organizations where essentially all the forensic audit did was confirm what we already knew. And those were actual thefts. One was a $2.5 million theft that had already been discovered. The other was an ongoing theft. I think if it's the council's wish to go down the forensic audit road, that is the council's wish and it'll have to be abided. What I would warn is that it is at least 3 to 4 times more expensive than what we're expending now to get the books caught up and be ready for audit, at least.
Well, I think it may be worth it since we're dealing with cash and not other issues that can be looked at pretty easily. So that's just my opinion right now. And, I'll just say that we've been told on many different occasions that we are not to get involved in the daily operations of any department, of any staff. And in spite of knowing or hearing about different things, we tend to let departments do their jobs, or we think they're doing their jobs. And really it's proven to be probably a bad idea, a bad practice. I think I've heard and I was aware of things that were going on. And again, allowing departments to do their jobs, I think in this case has proven to be a bad practice. So clearly I don't want to get it into that situation. I don't want to move there, but I still have many concerns moving forward, including whether we'll have an audit done on time. So even though I've been assured it will be done on time. So that's all I have, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Cassett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to thank my colleagues for their questioning, especially thank you, Madam Chair, for really taking us through that deep dive. I do have some follow-up questions. So there's been couple times we've referenced the contractors, and we had 4 contractors. Can you please review for us who they were and what their jobs were, because CLA is no longer there. We still have 3 more that I believe are still on contract, and what those different contracts are meant to do in terms of the work of the audit.
If I may, Madam Chair, Councillor Cassett, the primary contractor has been REDW, and they've essentially coordinated the contractor effort. They're the ones that worked with those contractors day by day. Essentially, the trial balance was divided up by accounts. We have 5,000 accounts, and each contractor was given a certain set of accounts to reconcile and to ensure that all the postings that happened that occurred during the accounting cycle or should have occurred during the accounting cycle, and then reconcile those accounts so that they're ready for audit. I think I've mentioned this before, the surprise good firm was Beasley Mitchell out of Las Cruces. They were assigned fixed assets and liability accounts, and they performed in a perfunctory manner. We've had Sloan and Company, I believe they go by the name of HB3, and they were responsible for the CFA, the federal funding, and accounting for that, generating the CFA, except for the decision was made, I don't know why, but the decision was made before I got here that they would not handle the CARES Act funding. That would be handled by former Director McCoy and REDW. And then we had, they referred to them as JAG, themselves it's JAG, it's Jaramillo Accounting Group. And they had different assignments. They started with the smaller cash accounts, and they handled a lot of the payroll related accounts like the PERA account, the FICA, the federal withholding, the payroll, the compensated absences, those types of accounts. And I'm trying to think of the fourth company that we had, CLA. I'm sorry?
I think you hit it. REDW, Beasley Mitchell, HB3, and JAG. That's 4.
That's 4.
Okay, you got them. Okay, so we had 4 contractors just focusing on the reconciling of our accounts.
Yes.
And is this all, they're all reconciling cash? So there's, okay.
Madam Chair, no. It essentially they're reconciling everything from all assets, liabilities, fund balances, because we have 70 funds, and each one of those funds has its own fund balance. We have income and expenditures.
Okay.
And all that needed to be accounted for, trued up, and reconciled to ensure that not only were the numbers correct, but that they had gone to the right funds, the right object codes, essentially the entire accounting stream.
Okay. And then you mentioned that there was a problem with essentially a software miscommunication between REDW, what they were doing their work on, and what CLA needed it to be in. So they were doing it in something and CLA wanted it in Munis, correct?
Madam Chair, Councillor Cassett, it wasn't necessarily a miscommunication. It's that the work that was being done to reconcile. So what REDW is, they essentially dumped our entire trial balance into their caseware system, which is what they're familiar with, what they work with, and reconciled it from there. When the auditors spoke to me, I think in the previous years, they had accepted that trial balance out of that system with the understanding that we would go back and post entries to true up Munis to that system. This year, what they expressed to me is that they didn't want to deal with that external program's trial balance. They wanted it reconciled all the way through Munis, and then they wanted the trial balance. something that didn't happen initially that was supposed to happen later on, but then they withdrew from the audit.
Okay. When were we aware that they wanted that to be done differently this year as opposed to what they've done in years past?
I was aware from the day I started because I touched base with them, but there was
Okay.
always an understanding. They understood that the work was being done within Caseware, REDW system. They understood that and they were fine with that because that's the system that they use. What they expressed was that, but the final trial balance needs to come out of the MENA system.
Okay. Okay. Thank you for giving me more details about that area. You know, Director Latero, one thing that you mentioned is that it sounds like getting internal staff makes this process easier. I know that we have had a challenge with hiring staff. So two-part question. One, knowing that this has been a challenge, how are we going to address that challenge? What are the steps that we need in order to hire? And two, sounds like we need to be plugging some holes while we are working on recruiting or training internally so that we have the internal staff to do this. And how are we going to move forward with some of these challenges that we had with coordinating a number of different contractors?
Madam Chair, Councillor Cassett, I think a couple of the key positions that Ricky and I were actually discussing this afternoon that we're going to really focus on hiring are, as part of the budget process, we are creating a compliance officer position, which will be interactive, not only, you know, with finance and the city as a whole. And I would prefer to allow him to speak about what their specific roles will be. Second thing we're going to do is we're going to make sure, you know, we get the Treasury Officer posted. It's actually our responsibility. We, you know, with budget and some of the issues with the accounting, it's been kind of on hold. We need to rework and make sure that we put the important qualifications in the Treasury Officer, because that position will be in charge of cash. So
Okay.
those are the two major positions, and those are very high level positions. We recently, as of last week, actually, the controller position was vacant, and we will be posting that very soon. We're just waiting on some final steps with HR. So that'll be the third key position within accounting and treasury to help us with these efforts.
Okay. City manager, I believe this is for you. Sometimes the hiring process takes a long time. These sound like they're very important positions from what Director Latero is saying to help us continue to work towards solving these issues, identifying these issues in completion and solving them. So how we can make sure that we are quickly moving through that hiring process, I think, is crucial. And also, I know that this has been, I've heard of shortages in this area throughout the state. And so I think that we need to be casting a pretty wide net to make sure that we are reaching individuals, how we post, how we advertise. There needs to be a lot of focus on putting in some of these building blocks in our department internally in the city to make sure that we can start to address these issues is important. Director Latero, kind of the second part of my question, again, you know, we are looking at right now, we really have to be looking at our short-term immediate fixes, medium solutions, and then those long-term permanent fixes. And so we will still be utilizing contractors. I currently as we are hitting the reset on the computer, as Mr. Bejarano mentioned. So how are we going to be, seeing as this has been a bit of an issue, how are we going to address it right now? Because this is what we have for the time being, and we can't really lose time.
Madam Chair and Councillor Cassett, I think that there's been some major lessons learned in all of this. Going back to when last summer, you know, we had the then accounting officer walk out the door rather abruptly, and we turned around and we engaged REDW to help us finish with last year's audit. And then we put out this RFP and hired these 4 firms. And lesson learned, I and Mr. Bejarano and I have discussed this at great length. We need to hire 1 firm to assist us and allow them to, assign and use their resources to get these things accomplished. When we hired the 4 firms, we did in fact agree to have REDW lead the charge, make the assignments, monitor the workflow, all of those kinds of things. I can't say that I think it worked exceptionally well. So I think the key is that we hire one firm and work closely with them and make sure what our expectations of this are clear and be aggressive and get our positions hired.
And are we going to be able to utilize one of our existing contracts for hiring that 1 firm, or are we going to have to go out for RFP again?
Madam Chair, Councillor Cassett, yes, we will have to go out for RFP again.
And have we started that process yet?
We were starting that process and everything happened last week, but yes, we will get back on working on that and getting that out the door as well.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. Let me just go through. A lot of these questions have been already asked. I think we're talking about a lot of technical things, and as Chair Romero Worth mentioned, as Councilor Rivera mentioned, there's a lot of, I think there's going to need to be a lot of discussion in this committee, looking at these processes, at these procedures, at this step-by-step, really getting into the weeds as part of this committee. But the other piece that I want to ask for the public is this going to impact our day-to-day services, the day-to-day needs that we provide to the city, or provide to the residents of the city? So people's ability to access our recreation centers and our libraries, our ability to clean up our parks, to take care of our streets, really those things that park in the, wherever there's a parking meter. Are any of those pieces currently, as we see it right now, going to be impacted by what's going on here?
Madam Chair, Councillor Cassett, that's the one good thing I think I can say is that our revenue sources have been coming in. So those things would only be impacted if we didn't have money, and we have money. We don't have a shortage of money. So I think long and short answer from my perspective is no.
Okay. Well, that is good to hear. Thank you. I am glad to hear that. Any other ramifications that we need to be aware of in terms of our ability to provide services as a city? So getting state and federal dollars, getting grants. And if so, how are we mitigating any of those impacts that might be coming through?
If I may, Madam Chair, Councillor Cassett, it all starts and ends with getting our audits in. I think Chairwoman Romero Worth stated this has to be fixed. It cannot continue. That is, I share that sentiment, and personally, I'll be working towards that. It's just got to get done. It has to be done right. I think Director Lotero made a very good point. There have been some very serious lessons learned. When I first came in and we had 4 contractors essentially tripping over each other, we've learned that lesson. We need one solid contractor. I believe that in the contracting process, I have a lot to offer. I'm very familiar, after 44 years in this state, in this arena, I think I can lend that expertise to where what will work, what will not, what contractors will work, which will not. It's always, everybody wants business, right? It's always easy from the outside looking in and saying, okay, we can go in and we can fix this. It's all going to be in how we solicit the next contractor. I am in total agreement. It needs to be one contractor, we can get this done. We have done this, but it's going to take time, effort, and more importantly than anything else, the right expertise.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate that. I think that it is, it is this challenging balance. We need to fix this. We need to get things in on time. But as you said, we also need to get them right. And so to Councilor Rivera's point earlier of this conversation around there being too aggressive of a deadline, and now we're here. And I think that's why we're going to have a lot more detail and a lot more conversation and really understanding what is happening so that we are balancing moving as fast as possible and as measured as necessary. I don't even want to use the word slow, but as measured as necessary to make sure that we are really getting these things right, as well as not just kind of plugging the holes, but really looking at the systems, looking at the processes, looking at the root causes of what got us to this place, and how we move forward. Which does bring me to my next question. One thing that I'm concerned about, I'm not quite sure how we address this, but you had mentioned that you had started to work on doing these month-end closes, which sounds like something that really needs to be happening to make sure that we don't get into this process where there's this mountain of work that cannot possibly be done in the amount of time that we would need to do it in order to get things turned in on time. But it sounds like those month-end closes that get working on those processes have currently paused in order to address this audit. Is that correct?
Madam Chair, Councilor Cassett, that is correct.
Is there a way that we can reasonably do both and do both well? Again, is this a matter of getting these staff positions hired? What is it that we need to do so that we don't lose too much ground on the 22 audit?
Madam Chair, Councilor Cassett, yes, it's a matter of getting the right people in the right place. When we hire a controller, it needs to be somebody experienced on both sides, both the accounting and the audit side, because of the situation we're in. The compliance officer is critical. It's something I've done before. Most organizations don't have a strictly compliance officer. Compliance officers do nothing but look at every compliance requirement that the entity has. And we have hundreds of those types of requirements, if not 1,000. That person is solely responsible for ensuring that getting the message out when it's succeeding, when it's failing. We have federal grants, we have state appropriations, we have state grants, and we have, for example, transportation. We have certain compliance requirements with transportation. Compliance officers take that on in addition to the people in the field. They're aware, so that there's always a fallback to if something happens with someone in the field, then we know what our compliance requirements are. We don't have that currently. So that's critical. The other piece is essentially the cash officer. I've mentioned before, cash is probably the most critical thing we do, inflows and outflows. That deserves that level of expertise for oversight.
Okay. It's just amazing the number of things that we have talked about that need to be done at this moment. And I'm really thinking about in terms of how we start to track this, how we start to measure this in our oversight role as a council. And it's sounding to me like we need to see a work plan. We need to see a list of benchmarks we need to be hitting. I mean, there's a lot going on here, and how we are given the information to track this and to understand this, how the public is given that information and of how to to track this, how we are communicating this out to the public, how we're communicating our progress, the information that we have at our fingertips, the information that we don't have, and how we continue to update them. I think that piece is crucial. I do not have a solution right now, but it is something that I do want to think about. And as Chair Romero-Worth, discusses us moving this forward, I would request, Chair, that is something that we kind of come up with a consistent system that we are seeing frequently, so that we are able to really be tracking. There's a lot of pieces here, and that's. I am encouraged that they have been identified, but it is concerning how many they are that I am having a hard time keeping them all together. One follow-up, Mr. Bejarano, that you had mentioned, I respect that, the kind of, this is our responsibility as a finance team's responsibility. I will say for all of the department directors, however, that and I do agree, imposing the will of the finance department onto other departments would not be an effective strategy. However, and I believe, this is probably for the city manager, that if there are systems that need to change within the departments, that I think that everybody really needs to be on board for looking how we are making adjustments. And there is a balance. There is absolutely a balance between we cannot put systems in place that make it so people cannot do their jobs. But I think that if we start to identify processes that really are not working, that we do need that collaboration and that expertise to come from finance, and that we are looking at the citywide component of this, because we cannot pull just the finance string and pretend that it's not going to be connected to all these different areas that we are dealing with revenue coming in. As you mentioned, it's the primary thing that a city does, and that is throughout the city. So I really want to put that out there for any department directors who are listening, and for the city manager, that making sure that collaborative piece everybody needs to be a part of this. We do need to. It's already been said, this is a problem. We have to fix it. We've identified problems. What I am really interested in from here on out is lessons learned are great. They're really important. And what is the roadmap? What are the next steps forward? What are the solutions? And how do we continue to get this train back on the track, keep it there? So I don't just want it to get on the track because we have figured out how to get through this audit, but really, how do we build the systems to make sure that we are on track, we can keep moving, and how do we continue to communicate that to us as the governing body, and our role as making sure that we are taking that oversight role very seriously, as well as so the public understands exactly what is happening, because I know that there's a lack of clarity right now. And there's a lot of questions that the public rightfully has. There's been a lot of confusion, and I think that we need to stay really on top of that. And I appreciate that the chair has already stated that this committee will be a mechanism for that. And so I really think we have to think very closely about how we translate a lot of this. This is really technical information. As you said, Mr. Bejarano, there are experts in this that are rare and very specialized. And there is a whole vocabulary, is a whole language, and how we really make that abundantly clear is going to be crucial. So I will leave it at that. I do want to thank you all for your work. I know that this is hard. I know that the finance team in general is working very hard and working a lot of long hours. And I want to recognize that work because I know that there's been, you guys are really working to fix this problem. And I do appreciate that. So I'll leave it there. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Counselor. Again, I'm going to go through the members of the committee. Councilwoman Villarreal, your hand is up.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to staff, particularly Mr. Bejarano, for your frankness and just directness that I think has been lacking for a while, and I appreciate that. I think one question I want to follow up, you were talking about these various contractors that have different roles. And I think the city manager and I have talked about this. I was never feeling comfortable about so many contracts out there in a variety of ways, mostly because there's a disjointedness that happens when you have so many people that are outside of the city and they're trying to come together to support different facets of our audit. So there was one though that you didn't mention because it's more than four. There's a fifth, which is Pinon Ventures, and I'm just trying to understand what their role is in all of this still, because I thought, having a contractor that would be the coordinator would help this process because there were so many contractors. So I'm not quite sure. Can you explain that a little bit more and how that's going to be continuing moving forward? Because that is the fifth contractor that you didn't mention.
I believe Pinon Ventures was hired for two things. One was to generate a report on structure and other things. I think Ms. Woodruff is online, but that
Well, I don't know if we should have contractors. Not all contractors are on here to be able to talk about their role, but I'm just curious from your point of view, from staff's point of view, how you see that moving forward. And what did you say about generating a report? I mean, can you say more about?
It was twofold. It was generating a report on our system and our structure, and the other was coordinating the various contractors. However, as time has gone on, that's been primarily REDW with some participation from Pinon. And then now at this point in time, I have taken on the role of coordinating the whole audit effort.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think that's just something I think the city manager needs to look into too, just figuring out what contractors are essential to this, which ones, if we have to bring in another auditor, who that's going to be. And then if Mr. Bejarano is coordinating, then, which I think makes sense as a staff person to be able to do that, but really just honing in on what contractors are essential and which ones are not necessarily essential, especially if the products we're getting don't help to actually fix the systems. So I just want to flag that as a possibility, just to think about how we're going to move forward with that. The other thing while I was listening to my colleague about the hiring, the other piece to it is like hiring is one aspect, but so is retaining the staff that we've actually hired in the past. There's been a lot and they've left for various reasons, but I just want us to be cognizant of that, and then just flag that I think we need to expedite through HR this process of hiring for this department. I know we prioritize it, but I think we need to do that again, like we've done with other departments, to support making sure that we get the right people in those positions that you referenced. So just
if I may, Madam Chair and Councilor Villarreal, that is very high on our list of priorities amongst everything else that's going on. A number of us are making very personal contacts and things are looking hopeful, especially for these positions, but we've finally gotten these positions placed or will have them placed at the right level, working with HR. HR has been a tremendous support to us in and allowing me to explain this is not like a frontline position. We need this level of expertise. Therefore, the pay has to be set right or they're not going to come. One of the things that is extremely advantageous when I've talked to colleagues that I'm trying to court to come here now is and I think we all need to be speaking about this, and that's that we only pay 3% of our PERA. I don't know what that number's up with the state, but it's over 10%. I'm aware of that. That's a huge advantage. The other thing, getting that pay scale up. Our benefits, I believe, are probably the best in the area. So at this point, what we're doing is we're marketing the city as the place to be employed. That's getting more and more effective. And that is our, right now, for me, that is number one priority. Of course, there are a number of number ones, but that's way up there. And I have extended a lot of effort in talking to colleagues and whatnot, but it's still a selling effort, because getting people
Absolutely.
to switch from what they're doing now, where they're comfortable and tenured and whatnot, it's a lift. But I think we can get there, especially with these three positions. Once we get these three positions filled with competent expertise, I think you'll see things rolling along. And of course, you will be holding me accountable. So I'm very, very hopeful.
Thank you for that. Thank you for saying that. I actually brought that up in budget hearings about how we promote our positions, the vacancies we have and job opportunities, and like really looking at it as a comprehensive package. And I was assured by the HR director that we do that. So let's hope that we continue doing that in a way that's very intentional for you all and the finance department.
And if I may, Chair and Councilor Villarreal, I can't say enough about how helpful HR has been. I think a lot of times you only hear how slow things are, but hiring, again, I've done this not for 44 years, but at least for 40, it's the hardest thing to do. And they are extremely helpful. They're extremely proficient. And I can't go on without saying at least how good my experience has been.
That's good to hear. Thank you. The other question I had that I'm brought up as a concern, and I was told that there was nothing to worry about, but we have potential for state grants, particularly one on the top of my mind is the New Mexico Finance Authority and the Water Trust Board, who are already recommending that our water department apply for a $1.5 million grant. And that's really to fix Nichols Dam, repairs that are essential. And we are at risk of getting that funding because we don't have an audit. And so there's these, I think there's ways that we can maybe hold them off and not lose that money. But I'm curious if this particular grant and others that I may not know about, what's the plan? And I don't know if this falls under city manager position or finance, but what's our plan to actually communicate that so that we don't lose essential funding that we need to be able to do what we need to do, which is, I think, kind of like the basic services component that you were just talking about. These things have ripple effects and they do affect our basic services. So what's our plan to communicate that? And I guess we could start there.
Madam Chair, Councilor Villarreal, I have already been communicating with DFA. The only hold currently that I'm aware of is that we've got to get the audit in on time before the next bond issue, or we'll have to wait till December. That's the one hold that I'm aware of. As far as grants and whatnot, I think what has happened in the past is if you're in our situation, then we have to make assurances that we've got that particular grant under control. At this point, that'll take more discussion and probably updated discussions with the people in local government at DFA to see really where we stand. But the plan is contact, stay in communication, and see where we stand and what we'll need to do to get that funding when we apply.
Yeah, I think that some may ask for like a documentation of our plan moving forward, and that may be sufficient, but I think there's others that, and I don't know if NMFA is one of them, but they may ask for a third-party fiscal agent. Are you all willing to do that if is something we need to consider?
Madam Chair, Councilor Villarreal, we will do what we need to do in order to deliver the services that we have to deliver. It's somewhat of a humiliation in some sense. But again, I've been more humiliated than that in the past. Another discussion for another time, but we will do what we need to do if it includes, I think, for lack of a better way to express this, if it includes humbling ourselves and doing whatever that's what we will do as a finance department.
Thank you. And then the other question I had as it relates to ARPA funds. With the audit delay, another audit delay, I'm just curious if you all have, I just want to be assured that we don't have any risks of not being able to receive or distribute ARPA funds.
Madam Chair, Councilor Villarreal, I've not heard of any delays there. That doesn't mean that they don't exist. We are required to upload our audits into a clearinghouse. But my experience in the past is that usually comes after we've been late before, but it's when the audits aren't in. So it is critical that we get the audit in. But I've not heard that there would be a delay. Generally, there's not with emergency funding like this. But again, it's not a question I can definitively answer at this point.
Can we get someone to look into that just to make sure? Because there's a lot of money coming down the pike, and I think we have a really solid plan. And some of those actually would affect basic services. They're important. So if somebody could make sure that that's not going to be an issue for us, and if it is an issue, if there's another like backup plan that the federal government or our contacts can let us know about.
Madam Chair, Councilor Villarreal, yes, we will definitely look into it.
I think Interim Director Latero has raised her hand perhaps to respond to that.
I have. Thank you, Madam Chair, Councilor Villarreal. I just wanted to assure you that that is another key position we're attempting to recruit and hire as a grants manager. In the interim, I know that Mr. Bejarano mentioned Tommy Chavez a little earlier in the conversation. She is the acting grants manager. So we have tasked her with making sure that the grants are, we can bring the money in, the grants are being accounted for. We're working with departments. All of the necessary things need to be done as it relates to the ARPA money.
Thank you. And then one other question, you said that basic services wouldn't be affected. And as I had mentioned in the budget hearing, we're relying heavily on private sector contracts for so many different departments. And so I'm just making sure that with the things that are happening with the audit, does that affect anything related to our contracting requirements to get people on board? And
Madam Chair, Councilor Villarreal, the purchasing section is doing extremely well. We're mostly fully staffed. We are going to retain an additional contract employee to manage just the ARPA money. So I can't say definitively, as Mr. Bejarano has been very careful to say, but I do not foresee any difficulties with the contracts moving forward.
We have City Manager Blair also raising his hand.
Chairman Romero Worth, thank you, Councilor Villarreal. Just to go back real quick, my understanding actually, and I have confirmed this with Director Brown, is that all ARPA dollars have already been, they're in our coffers. We already have those ARPA dollars. It's just the next step is for us to disburse them. So there's no concern about whether we get the money from the federal government. It's just us pushing it out swiftly. And that is also on our hot priority list for Director Lotero and Deputy Director Bejarano and myself. Okay.
thank you for that clarity. And just to follow up, I realize we have the funding, but there are these like benchmarks and things that we have to submit for the federal government. And I don't know the time frame, like when those reports, if they're quarterly or what. And So, yeah, even when that first report or whatever we're required, if we don't have something in place, I just want us to be cognizant of those timeframes.
Madam Chair, Councilor Vanadel, absolutely. We'll work on that to get that out to the council.
Okay. My colleagues asked the other questions I had, so I will yield the floor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Councilor Lindell.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for all being here. A question for Mr. Blair. First, we got a letter from the state auditor saying that we were to put out an RFP for a new auditor, correct?
Chairwoman Romero Worth, Councilor Lindell, yes and no. So we've not actually heard directly from the state auditor himself. We received an email from one of his staffers on the management analyst within the state auditor's office.
Did they tell us to get a RFP for a new auditor?
Madam Chair, Councilor Lindell, yes, that came in on Tuesday, April 26th.
And then when did we hear that we weren't supposed to get a new auditor?
Madam Chair, Councilor Lindell, on Friday afternoon, April 29th, about 10 to 5, an email was sent to our staff asking us to hold off on submitting the RFP.
Well, so where does that put us in trying to cross a finish line with this?
Madam Chair, Councilor Lindell, I would actually defer to Deputy Director Bejarano for the answer with that.
Madam Chair, Councilor Lindell, essentially we're in a holding pattern until the state auditor and DFA, I believe they mentioned, decide what next steps are. Our CPO, Fran Dunaway, has moved heaven and earth. She's got the RFP ready. If we have to RFP, then we're ready to go. It's ready to be issued. At this juncture, the state auditor could have the state auditor's office do the audit themselves as the state auditor's office. They could assign an auditor. They have the authority to assign a new auditor, or they could do a joint venture with another auditor. Or, of course, they could let us go ahead and release the RFP for a new auditor. So we're in a little bit of a holding pattern, but I don't believe that it'll be a long wait. I think they're just trying to decide next steps in conjunction with DFA.
So at this point in time, we really can't put a time frame on this.
Madam Chair, Councilor Lindell, we can't put a definitive time frame on this, but based on the various letters and communications going back and forth and the press, I don't think we're in a long-term holding pattern. I think that they desire for this to move forward as quickly as we'd like for it to.
Well, that would be good. So we seem to have a problem with going from one system to another and inputting information. We've kicked the can about Munis for a very, very long time. When I first started hanging around here, Munis was gonna be our next best, greatest thing. And I think we've spent vast amounts of money on it. And I don't think that it's really lived up to what we thought that we bought. And I'm concerned about inputting from one system to another. So, you know, I'm not an accountant. I don't know anything about auditing. Are these manual inputs happening on a high magnitude, a lot of manual inputs because Munis isn't working properly or we don't have the proper Munis? Are we looking at this as human input error?
Madam Chair, Representative Lindell, I believe it may be a bit of all of the above in the sense that to answer the first question, no, these are not manual systems. Like our point of, what I refer to as our point of sale systems are actual systems. They're just separate from Munis. I don't believe there is a system out there that is going to be one for all and all for one. We will still need to be more efficient in transferring data from the point of sale systems into the other systems. The problem with continuing to be on E1 is frankly, it's an accounting problem. It's not a systemic problem. We just didn't get on board with the fixed asset system. We did not get on board with the receivable system. And we didn't get on board with entering cash receipts, for example, directly into Munis. Those are functional issues, not systemic issues. When we do the upgrade, I'm hopeful that part of that upgrade is going to be working with experts that have used these systems before to see how they then got on board with these systems. The upgrade is going from 11.3 to 19.4, I believe. That's a huge jump. Like any ERP system, it's got its issues, it's got its challenges, but it's what we have. And the idea of moving, for example, to another ERP system would probably create more problems in the long run. Because if nothing else, at least we know the system currently to the best extent. When we go on board with 19.4, we can then move forward from where we are and implement hopefully by that time the fixed asset system will be used. It's already implemented. It already works. We're just not using it. And hopefully we can implement the accounts receivable portion, the module that works within Munis. But there will always be the issue of then how do you get from active cash register cashiering system and get the information and data into Munis. And that's what we will need help with. But it's a functional issue. It's not a systemic issue per se. I can't speak to the systemic issues, but those issues I've run into before and they're functional. We need to be clear what is a functional issue, meaning us as accountants entering data or transferring data from one place to the other, and what is actually systemic, what could potentially not work. Those issues I'm not familiar with because I haven't run into them.
Counselor, City Manager Blair has his hand up. I don't know if it was on this point.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Councilor Lindell. I wanted to see if we could give the microphone to our ITT Director, Manuel Gonzalez, for a moment, who's leading the upgrade of Munis and can speak a little bit, I think, to the councilor's questions, if that's okay.
Counselor Lindell, are you all right with that? Okay. Good evening, Mr. Gonzalez.
Good evening, Madam Chair and Councilor Lindell. I think we need to identify what Ricky was talking about, what's operational and what's technical. So there were several modules that were built out in Munis that were never utilized. For example, fixed assets. Fixed assets was built out. Traf was data was converted into Munis. the city just never started utilizing fixed assets. So that is there. We are working with Ricky to bring that online, to update the data that was brought over in 2019, so finance can start utilizing that. And then now we're talking about what's the technical issues. We have platforms out there that do not communicate with Munis because we're in an outdated version. ActiveNet does not communicate with Munis. UCIS that utility uses does not communicate with Munis. In order for them to communicate with Munis, we have to upgrade to a more current version and build out application program interfaces. Once we upgrade, then we can look at building out those interfaces. So utilities' new advanced billing platform will communicate with Munis and any other platforms that we need to utilize to communicate with Munis. As Ricky said, our target go live for the upgrade is late January of 2023. We're on Tyler's timeline for that upgrade. With that, I stand for questions.
Can I continue, Chair?
Yes, Counselor.
Thank you. So I'm trying to find out if we can identify areas where our inputs, do we have areas that are constant areas of problem with trying to get information into this system?
Madam Chair, Councilor Lindell, as Director Gonzalez stated, we have all these systems that don't directly communicate with Munis, and that requires manual inputs then into Munis from those systems. We will either download data or whatever to get it into Munis. The upgrade should take care of a number of those things. And as Director Gonzalez mentioned, then others will interface with the newer version of Munis, some of those areas. But in my experience, there is never going to be a one size fits all, one system that's going to take inputs from any system you have without some type of interface or intervention. And at that point, it's out of my wheelhouse and into Director Gonzalez's, who knows best. But we will never have a system that's going to work with everything that our programs are working with.
I appreciate that, but that's not really what I'm asking. What I'm asking is, do we have areas, be it departments, do we have areas that we have constant, that we can, first of all, can we identify them? We have these manual inputs. Do we have places that we can identify? First of all, are we able to identify, and do we identify problematic manual input? Continuous problems with the manual input.
Madam Chair, Councilor Lindell, I would have to answer yes, all revolving around cash receipt inputs. And that's what our audit or lack of audit has demonstrated, is getting that information from these various systems and into Munis. The more we can interface or create systems that talk to Munis, the better off we're going to be, because then it's an automatic process.
I'm not really sure that I'm being clear in my question. Can we identify areas that have consistent errors in their input?
I would, Madam Chair, Councilor Lindell, I think I did point out an area which is in our receipts and deposits and getting the information accurately into Munis. Those are inputs that clearly are problematic for us right now.
Do the people doing those inputs need retraining? Do they know how to do what we were asking them to do?
Madam Chair, Councilor Lindell, I believe that to state this as delicately as possible, this is an issue of expertise in leadership and how this needs to work with the accounting flow. So, and that's the reason for hiring a cash officer and hiring a controller and hiring a compliance officer. They're all inextricably tied. The processes, the procedures, the internal control structure that overlays over this. Manual systems in and of themselves or manual inputs aren't necessarily bad. You just have to have more control over those inputs because they are manual and more susceptible to risk of error.
Well, that's kind of what concerns me. And I mean, I think we're way past the point in this process of being delicate. I mean, I think we've all come to a point with this that the hard questions have to be asked. And it seems to me like Munis is a mammoth problem for us. And it has been for years. I think that that's something, City Manager Blair, that we're going to have to address. And I don't think that this meeting is the time to address that. I don't think that we can, but I think that it's something that it's mammothly problematic for city employees. Either they don't know how to use it, the modules aren't right, there is a problem there. And we're not in a very good place with it right now, that's for sure.
Counselor, we have a couple hands up on that point.
Go ahead, Chair.
I'd almost start with Mr. Gonzalez, but I don't know. City Manager Blair, do you want to start? All right. I think that was sort of, you know, if we're talking about Munis, that's our ITT wheelhouse. So Mr. Gonzalez, if you want to
Madam
help
Chair,
us understand.
Madam Chair, Councilor Lindell, Munis isn't the greatest platform. I think the city could have done a better job selecting a platform that suited the city of Santa Fe, but there are issues that the city of Santa Fe created and have to own. In the summer of 2018, Tyler Technology did notify the city that the city of Santa Fe did not meet the deadline on what APIs they wanted built out for Munis version 11.3. Tyler Tech notified the city they will not be building out any more APIs for that outdated version. The city has to own that. In the fall of 2018, the city decided to move forward with going live with a version 11.3, which at that time, I believe, was 7 generations old. We are now 10 generations old. So the city does have to own those two issues. Is Munis the greatest platform? No, it's not. Does it work? Yes, it does. Regarding training, the city of Santa Fe and Tyler Tech provided over 1,000 hours of training in Munis for city staff. So I agree with you, Councilor Lindell. Munis is a problem, but the city did make decisions that are impacting in the environment we're living in right now.
City Manager Blair. you
Madam
do have-
Chair, thank you. Councilman Dell, what I would add to that, that Director Gonzalez provided, is that I don't think there's any one thing around Munis that's the fail. I think there's a variety of points. It's like the Titanic. There are a variety of things that, went wrong. I think there's a real opportunity going forward about not just one-off training, but ongoing training for all staff around Munis, particularly around the finance department. We're going to work to build out our training programs for the city of Santa Fe staff regardless, so that there's ongoing trainings around supervision, management, et cetera. I feel like in the last 3 months, we've had some success in terms of meeting with all the folks who work on month-end closings, for example, closings, about ensuring that we have stressed the importance to each department of getting that done every month correctly. And at the same time, guaranteeing that finance staff will be available for training, for support, if there are questions, if there are calls, and that this isn't it's your fault, it's your fault, it's your fault. It is a collaborative effort to get done. So there's a number of things. We're excited about the upgrade that's coming. I can tell you the number of city staff from HR, finance. I am going to a national Munis conference in May to build relationships with Munis leadership, to make sure that we are prioritized with the things that we need to build those relationships and to get some additional training for some of our key staff. So per usual, we're going to do all the things we can to try to make sure that this works to the best of its ability. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Manager Blair. Just to be clear, this is not the Titanic. We are going to float. Councilor Lindell, you
I'll yield the floor.
okay. So all the committee has had an opportunity to ask questions. I think this has been very constructive, and I want to call on Councilor Garcia, who has also joined us tonight. And thank you for your patience, Councilor.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to my colleagues for the constructive comments and conversation. I really appreciate that, and all the feedback from staff. So thank you, Acting Director Lotero and Acting Deputy Director Bejarano. I do, as everybody knows, I've had some concerns with our auditing practices the last couple of years. I mean, it was stated earlier that there's a cloud over us. I mean, I think there's been a cloud over our auditing process for the last 3 years. I must say that I'm deeply concerned that it was less than a month ago. Yeah, I think it was our April 13th governing body, to be exact, that when we got our audit update, that it was a quick 5-minute update. Everything, as Councilor Rivera mentioned, was rosy, and there was even consideration of lessening the frequency, which at that point I spoke up and said, no, we need to continue at minimum with monthly updates to the governing body. What concerns me about that is that there had been communication with CLA to staff that we were in trouble. And so at that April 13th meeting, I'm surprised why we were not communicated that, hey, look, we turned in our first submission. Things aren't matching up. Things aren't working as well as we painted a month ago. We've got some work to do. Instead, it was opposite. I think we need to be real with the situation, and I do appreciate some of the frank comments that Deputy Director Bejarano has given tonight, because that is what we need. We don't need to gloss over this situation that we're in. This is a dire situation for the city. We're at risk of losing major resources. It was said earlier that we're not at risk of losing ARP funds, but we have a huge cash influx coming in from the federal government for infrastructure dollars. And if we lose out on that opportunity, that's going to set our city government back into the 20th century. It's not going to move us forward. So I do have a couple questions, Madam Chair, and I guess my first question is, staff is waiting for the state auditor to reach out to us. Why are we not being proactive and calling them knocking on their door and saying, you reached out to us, we can't wait for you. This is a critical situation. Let's meet, let's get our heads together. Because I don't want us to be in that situation where we are pointing our finger at the state auditor's office. They're not the ones who got us in this mess. And so I guess my question is, why are we not reaching out to the state auditor once we first got that communication last week to schedule meetings?
If I may, Madam Chair, Councilor Garcia, we did just that. But the response back from the state auditor's attorney general counsel was that they would meet with DFA and the local government division of DFA and let us know what the next steps are. But I did communicate this morning. I sent an email, high priority, and said we really would like to meet and figure out what we need to do to move this thing forward. They preferred to say, well, what he said was that they would meet with DFA local government and local government division, and that they would let us know.
Okay. And so how long are we just going to wait before we reach out directly to Mr. Colon?
Madam Chair,
City Manager Blair.
Madam Chair, Councilor Garcia, I spoke directly with the state auditor multiple times last week. So we have made contact and we are waiting to get guidance from him as to what the next steps are. We're not, and this is the complicated thing. We're not in a position of authority really to tell him what to do. And my reluctance would be if we pushed on that front, he would make that clear to us that that's not our place. I think we believed that when the email came out on Tuesday directing us to get a new auditor, we thought that was the path that we were headed down. So our staff moved as quickly as possible to begin the procurement process to get the auditor in place. And so, I think that it's reasonable for us to be expecting some sort of official communication under his signature, both identifying what he deems to be the significant problems and the steps that he is directing us to take in order to correct those.
Okay. And so we have spoken with him and we're working with staff. So, because it almost implied earlier that it's been radio silence from them, but in all honesty, they're working on their end to figure out the next steps. This is a very complicated situation. Making a determination whether or not they make the decision to have the state take over our finances is not a decision that would be made at a whim. And so I can completely understand some of the time it's taking in that sense. There's been statements on one side of the fence, for example, by Mr. Colon, that our finances are dire. We're in a very disastrous situation. On the other side of the fence, it's been painted by city staff that that's not the case. I think we're fortunate to have somebody like Deputy Director Bejarano on staff who has a deep resume and deep experience that I really actually admire in this particular field. And so I guess, Mr. Bejarano, how would you categorize our city's financial situation at this time with this audit?
Well, with this audit, to be perfectly honest, it's a real problem. We've got to get the audit in, we've got to get it fixed. We have to move beyond this. Is it the worst I've ever seen or experienced? No. But it's a bad situation. It's, from my perspective, any late audit, any audit with the issues that we have could be categorized as disastrous, but we are working to move through it. It can be fixed with the right mixture of staff and hard work and communication back and forth with the state auditor and DFA if necessary, we can move through this. I mentioned before, I've been here before and gotten to the other side of this. It is a doable situation. It's not so disastrous that we're not going to climb out of it. At this point, I think what I would say is what's important is to keep focus on climbing out of this and staying out of it, and looking also at an on-time 22 audit. But we can't even begin the 22 audit until the 21 is done. So I think you're wanting honesty. It's a bad situation, but it's not insurmountable.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Bejarano. I just want to make sure from, you know, I'm going to be frank. You've been really frank with your comments tonight, and I really appreciate that. We've been given little to minimal information since we've got the letter from CLA. And I want to make sure that I'm aware and educated as much as possible on this matter. You know, I don't have the privilege of sitting on this committee, and so I don't really have a say, so to speak, on the audit, a vote on a matter, but it's just as important to me as it is for any of these other 5 members that sit on this committee. And so I think at this point, I know that you have mentioned that we have some deep challenges with our cash receipts. And my colleague, Councilor Rivera, mentioned earlier, potentially looking into a forensic audit, or what you called, Deputy Director Bejarano, a forensic accounting. I think that's something I would probably encourage we look into. We need to ensure that as we get out of this process, our systems are watertight, and that we are setting ourselves up for success and for any situation that we couldn't plan for. We have contingency plans for anything that might pop up. And I think given the explanations about Munis and the challenges we're having around it, I don't know how easy it's going to be for us to dig ourselves out of this hole so quickly, and in particular to have our audit submitted by the what was, I guess, categorized earlier as an aggressive deadline of June. And I think that's where I will ask of staff to be real with us. If that, we're not here to set up deadlines we're not going to meet. And I want us to be able to be transparent and be real with not only us, but with the taxpayers, because at the end of the day, we have to remember these are taxpayer dollars. And if the taxpayers can't trust us with their money, then how can they trust us at all? And so with that, thank you, Madam Chair, for allowing me to ask some questions and give some comments tonight. I am deeply interested in this audit. I will be continuing the process all the way through and beyond the fiscal year 22 submission. And I just want city staff to know I wish you all the best. Please, reach out, let us know how we can help you, because as commented earlier, we're all in this together. This is got to be a collaborative effort. Staff, governing body, external auditors. This is something that's going to take us all to get through. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. City Manager Blair, you had your hand up, now you've put it down. Councilor Rivera and Councilor Garcia, if you could take your hand down just so I can keep things straight.
Thank you, Madam Chair. City Manager Blair, when is the 21 audit due?
Madam Chair, Councilor Rivera, we were required to submit our information by December 15th of 2021.
All right, and since we didn't meet that deadline, when's the next deadline?
I would defer, Madam Chair, Councilor Rivera, I would defer to Deputy Director Bejarano to speak to that.
Madam Chair, Councilor Rivera, at this point, it's as soon as humanly possible. There's no progressive if you don't meet it by this time, you have to meet it by this. It is due now, is, I guess, the correct answer. So we've got to get it in.
All right, and I'll just end this by making a comment that the council as a whole has been thrown under the bus with this whole process. We've been blamed for a lot of the process not being a strong enough council in dealing with the audit, and really, I don't think that's fair. I think we've addressed specific issues. When E1 was the system, we didn't implement everything with E1 that needed to be implemented with the system itself, which led staff to create shortcuts to have to deal with audits. A forensic study was done, nothing was ever found, and now we're with this Munis system. And again, we didn't turn everything on that allows the finance department to do their jobs and really keep track of everything that there is. We continue to repeat ourselves in the mistakes that we make, and nobody listens. Nobody pays attention to really the historical problems that we've had. And I think the council has tried to address those. They go on deaf ears. We're told that they'll make it work. It'll happen. And here we are 5 years later, and we're in the same situation we were in, talking about forensic audits, talking about doing things right. And I think it was Abraham Lincoln that said, you don't know where you're going until you know where you've been. And we haven't learned from any of that. So I think it's unfair to put this onus on the governing body. I think we've tried to make recommendations and suggestions about how to proceed. And again, it hasn't been really dealt with. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councilor. City Manager Blair, your hand is up.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, Councilor Rivera, I appreciate all that you said right there, and I'm grateful for you saying that. There's two quick things I just want to flag, and as you can tell by my hand going up and down and up and down and up and down, I've been debating whether to say anything. One is, I want to stress again, and I'm hopeful that you all appreciate this, the seriousness to which every staff member who's on this call takes this audit and the need to get it corrected. And so any mischaracterization that staff don't take it seriously, I reject wholeheartedly. I also want to stress that I believe strongly that I have made myself available to all of you, as has the mayor, to have multiple conversations about the status of the audit. In particular, I have offered to speak on the phone with a counselor, did not hear back. And so I even offered to set up, to request if that counselor wanted me to reach out to our city attorney to find out how we could do a formal presentation on the audit in a way that didn't violate the Open Meetings Act. Didn't hear back. So for me, it is important to say, we want to partner with all of you. We're going to partner with the state auditor. We are going to partner with any and everyone who has constructive ideas about how to improve our systems and how we can get this audit done correctly. And so, Madam Chair, I'm grateful for that and for your leadership. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Bejarano, your hand is up. And Councilor Rivera, if your hand is an old hand, will you take it down?
In addition to echoing everything that the city manager has stated, I think it's important that council know, first of all, I apologize that you're in this situation. I think that's important. And you certainly have our commitment. I think I've stated very clearly that excuse me, this is finance's responsibility. And I would say that far and wide. I'm not cowering from that, but it will take time to fix. And I personally am dedicated to that. The reason I choke up is we have incredible staff. that if the council feels under the bus, try being any one of my line employees. So I'll leave it with that, but the finance department takes full responsibility for this. Thank you.
Thank you. And I want to thank staff, frontline, all the way up to you, Mr. Bejarano, to you, Interim Director Latero, for continuing to soldier on in this effort. I want to thank the committee for tonight's conversation. I think everybody here asked good questions, constructive questions to help us get a better understanding of what is going on. As I said at the beginning, this is very serious. It can't go on. We have got to get this under control. This committee will do more oversight. I think we do need some sort of work plan so that we can have the presentations that we need at our meetings, at this committee's meetings, so that we can track the progress and so that we can hear about exactly what the issue is, what the solution is, how we're going to do it, what you all need, because we need to support both the finance department and the other departments across city government in getting this done. And I'm very, very serious about that. I want to repeat something Councillor Cassett said. We need to get this done as fast as possible, but as measured as necessary. I think those are very important words of wisdom. We might have to have t-shirts made. I don't know. So anyway, in all seriousness, thank you, everybody. I think we have a couple more items on our agenda. We have the introduction of legislation. Councilwoman Villarreal, I believe this item is yours.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Did you want to read the caption or?
I think,
you
yeah,
want
you
me
just
to?
need to introduce it. And you, I believe, can speak to it for a minute.
Yep. I'm trying to find the caption so I can read it, but hold on. This is a ordinance amendment amending section 23-5.2 to permit up to 10 small commercial events on the plaza. And this is being introduced at finance because this ordinance change is time sensitive. There's one event, potentially two events that are already going to be held at the plaza in June that would like to be able to have a few vendors sell during the event. While there were no promises made that this change would be enacted before their event, it was recommended by the attorney's office to introduce it sooner than later so that it could go through the committee process. And I just wanted to say that over the years I've been on council, I've heard from people who have organized events or concerts at the plaza, and they wanted to be able to have a small number of vendors sell, whether it was t-shirts or crafts or other products, in order to support small local businesses and boost local economy in a small intentional way, but also being able to provide a fun and entertaining space for the community for their event. We do this right now at the rail yard, and people have asked me and wondered why we haven't been able to do this on the plaza. So after looking into the issue, our plaza events ordinance only allows for what they call large commercial events, which is specifically the Big 8, Indian Market, Spanish Market, Contemporary Spanish Market, fiestas, 4th of July pancake, breakfast, etc. But it doesn't allow for any smaller events to have vendors during the events. So at the recommendation of the attorney's office, we worked a few months on additional language that would allow for small commercial events with restrictions. The restrictions are it only allows for 10 permits per calendar year for small commercial events held at the plaza, and that's on a first come, first served permitted basis. The vendors are only allowed to use the plaza park and not the streets like the large commercial events. The spaces reserved for the plaza artists, artisans, and the push cart vendors will still be reserved and remain in place during the small commercial events. And so we're moving this forward now to be able to work on any changes that we think might need to be made. But this did go, we did talk to staff about this and also the attorney's office and worked on this a few months so that we can be able to go through committee and work out any questions that my colleagues have. And that's it.
Thank you for that introduction. I will just remind us, we are not debating the substance of this legislation tonight. It's merely being introduced, and under our rules, the counselor introducing it has a couple of minutes to describe what it does. Counselor Lindell, your hand is up.
I understand we're not debating this. However, I am going to state that I think that this is improper, that this is introduced at committee. We spent vast amounts of time doing governing body procedural rules, and this has been worked on for a few months. I don't see any uncommon circumstances that made it such that it should be introduced at committee. Also, I don't see what the agenda is for committees with it. It's not in the packet. Additionally, it certainly isn't an emergency. So I don't know why we make these rules and then timing becomes such that we can't follow them. It's frustrating to me. We've all put stuff in legal and not had it come out as quickly as we wanted it to, but we passed these rules and I expect us to follow them. I see absolutely zero justification. Something that was worked on for months has to be introduced at committee. And Councilor Villarreal, this isn't the only time that this has happened, and it's not specific to you. This is just problematic procedure-wise for us. And I don't think that it should have been introduced at committee.
Thank you, Counselor. We're going to move on to matters from staff. I don't see, here we go.
Apologies, Madam Chair. No matters from staff at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Matters from the committee.
Madam Chair.
Councilor Rivera.
I thank Councilor Lindell for mentioning that, this isn't specific to Councilwoman Villarreal. I think it's been done quite a bit since we passed our new our rules. So I don't, understand why this would be different than any of the other ones that have been moved forward. I also think that the path, I guess, for where it's going to be moving towards is right under the introduction or the consideration of the bill. It talks about introduce a finance governing body, public comment on 511, finance committee 516, public works 523, and then governing body public hearing on 525. So I believe that's there. I believe it's followed what's been done with previous legislation, including the budget most recently. So I'm okay with this and would really like to sign on as a co-sponsor. Ms. Roybal, if you can list that. And then secondly, Madam Chair, both you and I and Councilwoman Cassett are heads of the committees. And I think I've noticed on my committee as well as this committee is that The roll call team tends to be the same every time. So on this committee, it's Councilwoman Villarreal and then myself. And on my committee, it doesn't alternate from one counselor to the other. So I'd like for us as the chairs, and I will commit to it myself as the Public Works and Utilities Committee Chair, to rotate the roll call as we do at governing body meetings. And I hope you two will consider the same on your committee. So just wanted to bring that up. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Counselor. I'll make sure to talk to the city clerk about reaching out to the staff of the three committees to make sure they understand why we do that, and that we need to be doing that at all three committees. I think it's a good point. I've noticed that in places too. All right, other matters from the committee. Matters from the chair, our next meeting Monday, May 16th. And again, I want to thank you all for tonight's conversation. I want to thank the staff for the discussion, for the answers, and have a good night. We're adjourned.
Good night, everyone.